Today we're going to be testing a full map of every tier 1 tower in Bloons TD5, and as most of you probably remember, I've already done this with 0-0 towers a few months back. So how much further will each of them get when upgraded to a 1-1? Well, for the Dart Monkey, those upgrades give it a range increase from the left path, along with increasing the pierce of its projectile from 1 to 2 with the upgrade on the right path. So I'm honestly not expecting an insane amount of improvement from this particular tower, but hey, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. And of course, just like in the 0-0 towers video, I'll be making sure to enable each tower specialist building here as well. And if you look on screen, you'll see that for the Dart Monkey, this increases their attack speed along with making their darts explosive. One final note, the map that I'm currently filling with them, Express Shipping, is the longest map in the entire game by a pretty large margin, which will allow each tower to truly reach its full potential. And I just have to say, the actual process of getting each Dart Monkey down was a whole lot less painful than it had been in my previous iteration of this video, because my friend Jort was actually nice enough to create an auto hotkey script that allows me to use my keyboard in order to place each tower precisely. I can move my mouse by 1 pixel at a time with the arrow keys or 20 pixels with WASD. In the past, I had to place every single tower with my mouse, which was quite frustrating and led to many small mistakes. But now, I can simply get each tower perfectly lined up with the last, which allowed me to end up getting a few more Dart Monkeys than I had last time. And before starting the run, I did mix in a single 0-3 MIB village that has enhanced range as well, which I'll be doing for every single tower in order to make sure they don't all just fail by round 59 with the camo lead balloons. And with that, we were off. Now of course, the early rounds were an absolute joke for our army of Dart Monkeys, which is a theme that will continue throughout the video. And since there isn't much to talk about yet, this is where I gotta do the obligatory YouTuber stuff by asking you to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely does help the channel grow a lot, more than pretty much anything else you can do. Now, it took all the way until the first ceramic balloons on round 40 for them to even make it onto the screen, and well, the Dart Monkeys tore through them extremely fast as soon as they did. They also made short work of the first Moab on round 46 as well, and pretty soon, the Dart Monkeys had officially beaten easy mode. But that was to be expected, as the 0-0 towers made it pretty far themselves. So, as you would expect, the tier 1 Dart Monkeys had no issue with the first BFB on round 60, nor the packed ceramics on round 63. You can tell they're still doing well by the fact that so many of the Dart Monkeys have yet to even fire a single shot, meaning the balloons still aren't making it very far down the track. And this trend continued, with the balloons getting destroyed before they could even make it out of the first square of the map all the way until round 78, where you face an even bigger wave of packed ceramics than the waves you had to take down on round 63. And you can see here, even by round 84, the Dart Monkeys were still having no issue, taking down all 50 Moabs and 10 BFBs without letting them make any real progress. So now, it was time to face the first ZOMG on round 85, and yeah, it stood absolutely zero chance. But now, the true test has begun, as we entered a point in which the game continues forward, but every single round, the Moab class balloons will be gaining a bit of extra speed and health, which isn't very noticeable yet on round 86, but the effects quickly add up. The regular balloons are also going to be getting faster as well, so it's only a matter of time before the Dart Monkeys simply cannot keep up. But my question is, how much of a difference will the tier 1 upgrades make? Well, last time, the 0-0 Dart Monkeys got all the way to round 96 before ultimately failing. But interestingly, they failed to just round 94 as tier 1s this time. But there is just one catch. Any tower that makes it past round 85 always gets 3 tries in these challenges, and that's because the amount of balloons you have to face becomes random at this point in addition to them getting stronger. So there is always a chance of getting unlucky and losing earlier than you should, which I think is what happened on our first try, because with our second attempt, the Dart Monkey had no problem cruising all the way to round 100 before failing again, which is ultimately where it failed on its third try as well. So, the tier 1 upgrades officially gave it a 4-round improvement. Now unfortunately, I can't actually use the auto hotkey script to place the tack shooter, since the W key is what you use to select that tower, so I have to go back to using my mouse while placing them down. And the tack shooter should be the exact same size as the Dart Monkey, according to what I was told by the BTD5 modder Nico, so I'm gonna try fitting them the same way. But yeah, I have to say, it didn't take long before I was really starting to miss being able to use my keyboard for this, especially because I didn't even have my wireless mouse with me, so I was placing each of these tack shooters with the trackpad on my laptop. But in any case, I eventually got them all packed in the best that I could, and unfortunately, I did miss like 2 or 3 down here by not getting all the tack shooters pixel perfect, but I don't really think that's going to affect them too much. However, I still had to actually go through and upgrade all the tack shooters to tier 1 towers now, and this was a bit harder than you might expect, simply because the visual cue for the tier 1 upgrades on this tower is extremely subtle, so it would have been easy to accidentally miss one if I didn't go through in a grid-like pattern. But after nearly 50 minutes total, I was finally ready to test out this tower. And if you're curious what the tier 1 upgrades do for the tack shooter, well, on the left path, you get a boost to your attack speed, while the right path gives you a bit more range. So, just like with the Dart Monkey, I'm not expecting to get a ton of extra power compared to the 0-0 tack shooter, but this was one of the stronger towers that we tested in that video, so I do have decent hopes for the tack shooter overall here. I will say though, during the earlier game, it actually looks worse against the ceramic balloons than the Dart Monkey did, and round 63 in particular was quite difficult for the tack shooters to handle. But they did get through it, and as we got into the later rounds, that's where this tower really starts to shine. You see, against the larger Moab class balloons, you'll have multiple tacks hitting them from every single shot, which quickly stacks up the damage and gets them destroyed without much trouble. This included the 50 Moabs and 10 BFBs on round 84, along with the first VOMG round after that. However, something really weird happened, which was the fact that our tack shooter army failed to just round 89, which you will know makes no sense because the 0-0 towers had got all the way to round 100. And sure enough, I had actually forgot to enable the tack shooter special this building before, which will give it another 10% attack speed buff along with 1 extra pierce. And wouldn't you know it, but this building really makes an absolutely incredible difference, as now the tack shooters were easily tearing through everything without any trouble, including round 96 where they had to face an RBE of 750,000. And after that, they just kept on pushing, with round 100 quickly falling, and it wasn't all the way until round 106, which had nearly 1 million RBE, that the tier 1 tack shooters finally failed, now that I had their specialist building also enabled. Of course, that attempt without it didn't count, so they still have 2 tries left, although the second didn't net us anything at all, with the tack shooters still failing to round 106. However, on the third try, it had a bit of a lower RBE, which did allow us to beat that round, but there was absolutely no way that we could survive the insanity that was round 107 right after. So with the tack shooter, tier 1 upgrades got us an additional 7 rounds compared to the 0-0s. And thankfully, I can go back to using the auto hotkey script that Jort made for me now that we're onto the Sniper Monkey. And honestly, I just have to say, after placing the tack shooters manually, I really appreciate how much more precise this method of placing towers actually is. Not to mention the fact that it doesn't cause a noticeable spike in my blood pressure the way that manually placing towers will tend to do. Now, I am expecting a pretty noticeable difference in the tier 1 Sniper Monkey, as these upgrades will bring its damage per shot from 3 to 5, along with allowing the sniper to fire faster as well, effectively giving it more than double the damage per second. The reason that its base damage isn't going up from 2 to 4 is because the sniper also gets 1 extra damage per shot from its specialist building being enabled across the board, meaning the 0-0 already starts with 3. This building is also giving them 10% faster attack speed off the bat, so needless to say, the Sniper Monkey is a formidable foe even as a 1-1 tower. Although I do have to say, well, that was a little redundant, but when I was upgrading all the towers, I noticed BTD5 kept lagging behind, which would cause one tower to be upgraded to a 2-1 and the next to be upgraded to a 0-1, which was a little bit annoying. But thankfully, the sniper has a more obvious visual cue than the tack shooter did, so at least I was able to notice it pretty easily. And as you would expect, the army of 1-1 towers absolutely tore through the early game, with the first Moab being one-tapped by all of them hitting it all at once, along with the first BFB as well. Even the dense ceramics on round 63 really got shredded, which is a great sign for the snipers. And sure enough, they turned the 50 Moabs and 10 BFBs on round 84 into an absolute joke as well. And the first UMG afterwards literally got 2-tapped and cleaned up entirely with just a few more shots. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that the tier 1 Sniper Monkeys began tearing through the free play rounds as well. But this is where something really interesting happened. They did make a large amount of progress, surpassing round 100 and eventually getting all the way to round 107, which is a full 12 rounds better than the 0-0 snipers performed. But after the really close call we had on round 107 with our first attempt, we then lost to the same round on the second and didn't even get close this time before literally having the closest attempt I've possibly ever seen in any of these challenges on our third try. I mean, seriously, this was pretty ridiculous. And by the way, this is how long it took me just to do everything for the sniper, so hopefully that's worth a like and sub if you haven't already considered it. And up next we have got the Boomerang Monkey, which is definitely larger than the first 3 towers we've been working with, so not nearly as many were able to fit. And I'm also not exactly sure how much value we're going to be getting from their tier 1 upgrades. The left path does allow each rank to go through 7 balloons, which should be pretty valuable, but the right path just lets them attack frozen balloons, which is not going to change anything at all. And with their hitbox being larger, I had to think about how to fit this tower differently, and noticed that we are so close to being able to get one more row at the bottom here. Beyond that, this tower also doesn't fit on the right side of the map like the first 3 had. So with that all in mind, let's see what our army of boomers can pull off. Oh, and while the early game is going, I should mention that their specialist building is giving them a couple interesting perks as well. The 10% attack speed increase is super standard at this point, but the 3rd level will allow the ranks to fly a second circuit if they haven't used up all their pierce yet, making the 7 pierce they're now getting more valuable than it already was. And then from the 4th level, they also get a second rang, which isn't as powerful as their main one, but still does add some extra overall damage per second to the Boomerang Monkey as well. So of course, they had no problem whatsoever taking down the first Moab on round 46, nor the first BFB on round 60. And this trend continued with the ceramics on round 63, along with the regrow ceramics on round 76, and of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it, they also tore through the densely packed ceramics on round 78 as well. And pretty soon, we were entering free play once again, but this time, our journey wouldn't be quite so impressive. The early rounds were going fine, but once we got to round 93, the Boomerangs actually got overran, which is only a 3-round improvement from the full map of 0-0s. However, that was pretty bad RNG for such an early round, and sure enough, on the second try, they only had to face 280,000 RBE on round 93, but beyond that, the Boomerangs were able to continue surviving through more difficult rounds before getting overwhelmed by ceramics on round 97 this time, and on the third try, they failed to that round once again. So ultimately, that's a 7-round improvement for them. And now it's time to see what the Ninja Monkey is capable of, and this one should definitely be interesting. You see, their specialist building gives the Ninja Monkey not just a generic 10% speed increase, but also the ability to clone a 0-0 version of itself for every ninja you have on the map. But from what I remember, this didn't make as big of a difference as I had expected when I tested the full map of 0-0 Ninja Monkeys, so we'll see what happens here. But I also think the tier 1 upgrades should make a pretty big difference, as the left path gives the Ninja Monkey extra range and attack speed, along with the right path allowing its projectiles to seek out balloons and get the full value from their pierce. So hopefully, the ninja can set a new record here. It's also really cool how their activated ability actually allows me to see that I have a total of 360 ninjas placed, which should also be true for every tower that's been the same size as it. Now, I have to imagine that after a little while, you start to get tired of hearing the same lines over and over about how easily the first Moab and BFB got destroyed, and how the packed ceramics on round 63 were torn through. Trust me, I get tired of saying it as well, but genuinely, I don't know what else to say unless I just start skipping to round 86 or something. And when I test a full map of every tier 2 tower, that's definitely what I'm planning on doing. But needless to say, the Ninja Monkeys had no difficulty reaching into the early free play rounds, and at first, they were handling them well. But then something interesting happened, which I know I've said a lot, but they actually lost to just round 98 when I wasn't using the Shadow Ninja ability. This doesn't count as a strike against them, but the reason this is noteworthy is that with the ability, the 0-0 ninjas had gotten to round 100. And sure enough, once I began using the Shadow Ninja clones, we got past that mark once again, managing to survive round 102 when the RBE got pretty high, although even with the activated ability, our ninja army could not handle the 1.2 million RBE on round 107. The second try was still tough, but this time, round 107 wasn't as bad, allowing us to pull through, but round 108 proved to be too much once again. And on our final attempt, we were getting closer, but the ceramic balloons just barely overwhelmed all the Ninja Monkeys before they could shred them all. This marks an 8-round improvement for the ninja. Up next we have got the Bomb Tower, which actually gets an activated ability of its own from its specialist building as well. However, what this does is double the range of the Bomb Tower while active, and this is notorious for arguably making the tower worse because it has a relatively slow projectile that will often miss when trying to fire at balloons that are too far away. However, the ability did help us when I tested the full map of 00 bomb towers, so I will be using it here as well. But I'm not super confident that the tier 1 upgrades will actually make a huge difference, as the left path is a range upgrade itself, while the right path just makes the bomb's explosions a bit larger. But I would love for them to prove me wrong and somehow get an extra 15 rounds or something. And I thought this tower was the same size as the Boomerang Monkey, but after fitting them all down, I actually think it's the tiniest bit smaller, because I swear I've gotten a few more in spots where I couldn't fit boomerangs before. But in any case, it's also cool being able to see we have 221 of them exactly. And I never really thought of this, but the bomb tower is sort of like the opposite of the sniper monkey, at least as a low tier tower. It only does 1 damage per shot, but has a lot of pierce, which is evident by the fact that the first Moab, and especially the first BFB, actually made it kind of far, while the packed ceramics on round 63 got quickly destroyed. This makes the low tier bombs worse against a single target that's strong, but really good at cleaning up weaker grouped balloons. And on round 85, the first ZMG proved that once again with the amount of progress it was able to make. However, once we got into free play, the bombs really started to show their true strength. Groups of Moab class balloons didn't fare any better than they had as single targets, as the pierce of each bomb allows it to hit several of them at once, along with the ceramic balloons passing by underneath. And on round 100, I figured I would start using the activated ability, which you can see is quite powerful at the beginning of the round, where using them all gives nearly every bomb tower on the map the ability to fire at the newly spawned balloons for a bit. And if you run the game in fast forward mode, you have enough time to use every ability right before they begin coming back, allowing you to have a constant stream of them active. This kept us pushing through to round 107, where we had a close call with all the ceramics, but ended up actually surviving. However, despite the crazy fight that the bomb towers put up on round 108, they ultimately got overran. On our second try, they did beat this round, making the bomb tower our new leader over the ninja monkey, but round 109 had a huge wave of ZOMGs that they simply couldn't defeat. And on the third attempt, the game kept sending wave after wave of them, which was more than enough to destroy any hope of the bomb tower reaching the 110 mark. Ultimately, they got an improvement of 8 rounds over their 0-0 counterpart. And our next 2 towers would be thrilled just to improve at all, because even with tier 1 upgrades, both the Ice Monkey and Glue Gunner simply cannot deal damage to the balloons whatsoever. So, if we used fast track mode to skip the first 25 rounds, they would both end up losing to round 27 simply due to running out of lives. Which brings us to the Monkey Buccaneer. And you might notice I'm filling a different map than usual. And that's because this tower of course has to be placed on water, so it makes a lot more sense to play on Flooded Lane, as it's literally a water-filled version of Monkey Lane and allows you to fit way more Buccaneers than portable legs on express shipping would. Also, I didn't realize how stupid I was being when I manually placed all those tack shooters before, because all I had to do was change the key that you use to move your mouse by editing the auto hotkey script in my notepad app. Now, I do remember that the 0-0 Buccaneers didn't do very well, but I really do believe that this tower has the chance to make the biggest tier 1 improvement we've seen thus far. You see, the left path gives it faster shooting, and from the right, you get the Grape Shot upgrade, which adds another 4 projectiles to the tower as well. You might also notice it's firing flaming cannonballs as opposed to darts, which is a perk from the Buccaneer Specialist building. Now, I was expecting the early rounds to go down without any issue, but I did want to take note of how they did against the first BFB, and it got absolutely shredded. I was mainly curious because, like I said, the 0-0 Buccaneer wasn't very strong, failing pretty early to free play. But based on how the tier 1s are handling the round 85 ZOMG, I'm not expecting the same result here. And sure enough, they began tearing through the early free play rounds, quickly getting past round 88 where the 0-0s had failed. But what I didn't expect was just how much of an improvement we were actually going to see. It didn't take long before round 100 had already fallen, which is a huge improvement on its own, but what happened next truly shocked me, as the Buccaneer went on to become the first tower in this video that could reach round 110, and it not only did so, but kept on going still. I guess the Grape Shot projectiles also have a lot of pierce like the main projectile does, allowing them to shred through everything. Ultimately, it wasn't until round 115 where the Buccaneer finally failed on its first try, although I do have to say that while the second and third seemed easier, this was the round that it ultimately took it out. but still a 27 round improvement is even more than I had originally expected when I was saying how good the grape shot upgrade should be a couple minutes ago. And speaking of good towers, the Monkey Ace already performed pretty well as a 0-0, although that was largely due to its specialist building that adds machine gunners to the airplane. And honestly, I'm thinking this might end up being sort of the opposite of the last tower we just tested, in that the Ace was already really strong as a 0-0, but the tier 1 upgrades might not do all that much for it. The left path allows their main volley of darts to fire more quickly, while the right path gives them the ability to drop pineapples on the track, which I really don't expect to do very much for us, honestly. And I feel like even if the Ace did improve 5 rounds or more, I still won't be very impressed after what we just saw from the Buccaneer. It's actually crazy to think that Monkey Lane is only half as long as express shipping as well. But in any case, you don't need me to tell you that the Ace had no problem reaching free play, where it continued to handle the early rounds well. But that isn't a surprise, considering that the 0-0 Monkey Aces had already gone all the way up to round 103. And sure enough, we got past round 100 with the tier 1s, and this time they did beat round 103 as well, which is definitely a good sign, making it up to round 107. And we still have 2 tries left as well, and sure enough, our second one actually got us up to round 111, where the game threw an insane amount of blimps at us that we had no chance of defeating. And while the third attempt was closer, this is where the tier 1 ace ultimately failed. So honestly, an 8 round improvement isn't so bad. But I'm really excited for our next tower, as we're now testing the Super Monkey. Of course, this is by far one of the most expensive towers in the game, so it should be really good at any tier when it gets to fill the entire map. But on top of that, from the left path upgrade, we get laser vision, which doubles both our pierce and our damage as well, effectively giving the Super Monkey 4 times the damage per second. We are also getting more range from the right path, which is letting them cover a good amount of the map when combined with the range boost that we also get from their specialist building. This is also the second largest tower we've placed down so far, obviously after the Ace, and as you can see, they only fit in a 3x3 pattern in the upper left corner. But that didn't stop them from costing around $840,000. And yeah, honestly, there isn't anything to even say besides the fact that this defense absolutely obliterated all the early rounds, making it into free play without even beginning to break a sweat. And naturally, the laser vision was tearing through the blimps during these early free play rounds as well. But what I found really interesting was just how dominant they continued being even well past the round 100 mark. It didn't take very long to surpass the record set by the Monkey Buccaneer, and as you can see, a lot of the Super Monkeys haven't even had to do anything yet because they're still in their default position. And thus, the balloon carnage continued onwards, extending well beyond even what I had expected. Keep in mind, the 0-0 Super Monkeys had gotten to round 114, which was really impressive, but with the laser vision, they pushed that all the way to round 142. Truly an incredible mark. Just imagine how strong they'll be as tier 3s and 4s. And on the second try, the Super Monkeys were able to push all the way up to around 146, where things got a little too insane for them to actually keep up with. And this is ultimately where they failed on their third attempt as well, marking an insane 32 round improvement from when they were 0-0 towers. And now it's time to see what the Wizard Monkey is capable of. They perform pretty well as a 0-0, and I think the tier 1 upgrade should be pretty decent, with the left path making its main projectile gain more pierce, while the right path adds a fireball, which makes a total of 3 projectiles because the wizard also gains a seeking energy attack from its specialist building as well. But I just have to say, this is where something kinda weird ended up happening. Alright, I guess I shouldn't say weird, but like, I just can't quite wrap my head around this. You see, we're past round 100 now, and take a look at this. Just like with the Super Monkeys, there are still a ton of wizards that have yet to even begin engaging in the battle. And that's because all the balloons are still barely making any real progress down the track. We're already well past the round 98 mark that the 0-0 wizards had failed to now, and somehow, this tower just keeps on going and going. And this is what I found so mind-blowing. Like, how is the addition of those tier 1 upgrades making the wizards so powerful? I mean, their range isn't even nearly as good as the Super Monkeys was. And yet somehow, they didn't fail until all the way on round 129, which is just like, how? And on the second attempt, they got past it as well, sailing all the way up to around 134, where the wizard army ultimately got overwhelmed by an even stronger army of blimps. And then on the third attempt, they failed to the same round. But yeah, that's a 36 round improvement from the tier 1 upgrades. Did Ninja Kiwi like secretly buff this tower in BTD5 for no reason without telling me? What in the world is going on here? But now we must come back down to earth with two towers that cannot attack with their tier 1 upgrades at all. Those of course being the village and the farm. I am going to be excited to eventually get to test a full map of energy beacon villages though, because that might actually have some real potential. And that brings us to the mortar, where I actually forgot to press record the first time, so we're running it back now, and this tower would be a total nightmare if its specialist building didn't grant it the ability to automatically target the balloons like a regular tower. Additionally, we're also getting increased accuracy from the tier 1 upgrade on the left path, along with a higher rate of fire from the right path upgrade. Now I remember the 0-0 mortars did about as poorly as the 0-0 buccaneers, so let's see if we get another Cinderella story from the mortars tier 1 upgrades. Although to be honest, I'm definitely not expecting all that much. I also noticed how slow the gameplay becomes once you start getting close to free play, because the way that the mortars attack is just, well, it's pretty slow. They did take out the first ZOMG pretty well at least, but as soon as we got into the early free play rounds, our pace really slowed to a crawl, with them taking around 3 times longer than usual. So I was a bit thankful when the mortar was already struggling to round 92, and sure enough, it stood no chance to round 94, where they would have still had to defeat a huge wave of ZOMGs that was making it far down the track. On the second attempt, round 94 was easier and the mortars were able to survive, but on 95, they got overwhelmed once again, which is also what happened on their third attempt. So the mortar got a much more modest 8-round improvement from its tier 1 upgrades. But our next tower has the potential to be a lot more interesting, because we have the Dartling gunner, which was easily the second strongest 0-0 tower, right behind the Super Monkey, although I don't think we will get quite as much value from this tower's tier 1 upgrades, since the left path just makes their stream of darts more accurate, which tends not to matter that much when you're filling the entire map with dartlings, and on the right path, we do get faster darts and an increase to 3 pierce, which is further brought up to 4 by the Dartling gunner specialist building. So, just how far can this army get? Also, how did I never realize how cool it looks when you just have a bunch of them all following your mouse like this? But I don't need to tell you that getting to free play was absolutely no problem whatsoever. And even as we approach the round 100 mark, our Dartling army continued to vaporize everything in their path. I had them pointed up to the upper left corner and let them just keep on going. Although I noticed that by around 109, it seemed like the balloons were actually making a lot of progress. So I took control of them after that, but quickly realized that you still want to keep them pointed in the upper left area as long as possible, so that each Dartling is able to take advantage of all 4 pierce that it's getting per shot by shooting across the map. So I just let them keep on going until they failed without my control on round 113, but I had to admit, once I started controlling them, I definitely wasn't doing a perfect job of things, and ended up still getting overwhelmed by all the ceramics on round 113, with just how difficult it ended up being. On my second try, the next couple rounds had a much more favorable RBE, which allowed us to get through them quite easily, but when things got really tough again on 115, I got overwhelmed once more. I ended up taking more than 3 tries total with the Dartling gunner since it is up to my control, but even so, I ultimately lost to round 117, where I think it would have been really hard to take care of everything. But I'm willing to admit that my own skill issue is definitely a limiting factor when it comes to this tower. And the Dartling gunner improved by just 4 rounds with its tier 1 upgrades, tying it with the Dart Monkey for the smallest overall improvement. But our next tower really should have a chance to improve quite a lot, and that's because we're working with the Spike Factory, which performed pretty poorly as a 0-0 tower. However, its tier 1 upgrades are kind of insane, with the left path doubling the damage that each spike pile does, while the right path increases that rate at which the Spike Factory produces them. And here's where things get interesting. This tower's specialist building gives every spike pile the ability to pop 50% more balloons, which is already 15 damage per pile. But then, on top of it all, the 40% popping power increase I get from my Monkey Knowledge Laboratory actually functions as a 40% chance for any projectile to deal twice the normal pierce. For most towers, this is helpful, but it doesn't make an insane difference necessarily. However, when it comes to the Spike Factory, this literally means that each pile has a 40% chance of dealing 30 damage instead of just 15. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for the potential improvement here. Although first, we have to endure this. An incredible amount of lag due to the sheer amount of spikes that are constantly on the track. But at least the Spike Factories were handling all the early rounds well, and they continued going strong into free play as well. Pretty soon, they had crawled their way past the round 100 mark, and I mean honestly it's kinda hard to tell what's even going to happen with how ridiculous this gameplay looks, but ultimately, our lag army was able to get up to round 105 before failing for the first time. and when I got back from my walk, I started up its second attempt where the Spike Factory got favorable enough RNG to actually beat 105 before failing to round 106, which is where it ultimately lost on its third attempt as well. So overall, that's a 16 round improvement, not bad at all. But our next tower got further than that, just as a 0-0, because the helicopter is actually quite powerful. And its specialist building literally makes the tower 20% smaller, which should allow us to get a good deal more of them than otherwise possible. But actually getting them placed is a whole different story, as this tower loves to get in your way and make sure you literally cannot see what is going on whatsoever. This wasn't as bad for getting them placed as it was for trying to upgrade them though, which definitely made me want to throw my laptop out the window. But as far as the tier 1 upgrades go, the upgrade on the left path is going to double the amount of darts it can fire, effectively doubling our damage per second, while the right path upgrade allows the helicopter to fly a lot faster, which could be useful when I'm controlling it later on. But as for now, I figured I could let them sit in a decent spot and take care of things for me, which worked well into the early free play rounds. In fact, even past round 90, the helicopters were continuing to prevail. However, they would end up losing to round 96 without my control, so I took over at that point, which allowed the helicopters to continue pushing on past the round 100 mark. When I got to round 106, I had to start slowing things down in order to make sure I could keep up with everything, and after a little while longer, I ended up failing to the insane RBE on round 111. After that, I kept on pushing forward, trying to control the helicopter the best that I could, which allowed me to get up to round 116 before failing on my second try. And despite how well I played on my third attempt, I still couldn't get past that round, which marks an improvement of 9 rounds for the helicopter over its 0-0 counterpart. And now we have the Engineer Monkey, which honestly, I can't even begin to measure the potential of. The reason I say this is because, as a 0-0, it already got to around 95, and the thing is, its tier 1 upgrades are going to allow it to begin producing sentries, which will now be turned into super sentries thanks to its specialist building, along with the right path upgrade giving the engineer's main projectile a Pierce of 8 as well. So yeah, I honestly can't wait to see what this tower pulls off. And needless to say, once all the sentries are actually placed down, it really starts to look a bit ridiculous. Beyond that, I can't really tell what's actually going on, but I will say our army of engineers had no problem reaching free play, and beyond that, they were still tearing through everything as well. Even past round 100, the balloons were still barely making any real progress, and thus I sat back and watched as round after round of balloons got taken down, before finally, on round 126, the engineers lost for the first time. On their second try, 126 was really insane and there simply was no chance of beating it, but at least on their final attempt, we were able to get past that round before ultimately failing to round 127. So that's a very impressive 32 round improvement. Now if you did watch the whole video where I tested a full map of each 0-0 tower, you'll probably remember that the balloon chipper couldn't even attack lead balloons despite having an MIB village, which is still true of the tier 1 chipper. And that just leaves us with the monkey sub, which of course I'm using the map flooded lane for. And I gotta say, this tower did absolutely terrible as a 0-0 as it literally failed to just round 76. But I am somewhat optimistic as the left path upgrade will increase the pierce of each projectile from 2 up to 3, while the right path upgrade doubles the attack speed of each sub. So yeah, I'm not expecting a miracle, but hopefully, the submarine can break into the free play rounds this time. Now with most of the towers, I had stopped acknowledging anything before free play, but of course the 0-0 subs didn't even make it that far, so I'll repeat the classic lines. The first Moab went down without much difficulty, along with the first BFB as well. Although you can already tell this tower is not going to be that powerful still. Now thankfully, they did beat round 76 this time, and they did actually push their way up to free play as well. In fact, the first few rounds went alright, but it quickly started getting overwhelmed, failing to just round 93 on its first attempt, which is also where it failed on the second. Now its third try did net the submarine one extra round, and as unimpressive as this performance was, that's still an 18 round improvement at the end of the day. Now the leaderboard is on your screen, but I just have to say, I'm insanely impressed by what the Super Monkey did, even though I expected it to win, because the amount that it improved by 32 rounds is really insane on its own, but to do so when it already had reached round 114 as a 0-0 really shows how insanely powerful the laser vision is, because keep in mind, at that point, the rounds are a lot more difficult than they are at the 85 mark, so if a tower made it to round 90, let's say, So if a tower made it to like round 87 and improved the same amount, I would argue it's less impressive. Beyond that, I mean, what do I even say besides the Wizard Monkey is absolutely insane. Round 134 from tier 1s. I don't know what's going to happen when we have Dragon's Breath, but when I did the... But I remember testing the Wizard Monkey and it barely got further than that when I just was... But that seriously was my biggest surprise this video, and definitely an outlier. Of course, in third place, we then had the Engineer, being the only other tower to surpass round 120. And again, the full leaderboard is going to be on screen if you want to check it out. But if you enjoyed this video, I would also recommend you watching the 0-0 video if you haven't already. However, the video on screen is a different one that I think you might also enjoy.